Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're diving deep into Fruit Battlegrounds to bring you the ultimate fruit tier list. If you're wondering which fruits are worth your time and which ones are better left on the shelf, you're in the right place. We've spent some serious time testing these fruits across different modes to give you the most accurate breakdown. Whether you're looking for insane damage output, speed, or just a fruit that feels super fun to use, we've got all the info you need to make your next battle a breeze. Now, I know everyone has their personal favorite fruit, but today we're ranking them based on their overall performance. Some fruits might shine in specific situations, while others are great all-rounders, so get ready for a detailed look at the fruits that can give you that edge in battle, and the ones that might need a little more work to really shine. Stick around because we're about to break it all down for you. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking fruits in Fruit Battlegrounds. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
A very small portion of the audience is subscribed to the channel. Please don't forget to subscribe if you like these types of videos. Thanks.
The fruits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Barrier and Chop. Alright, let's talk about two of the most underwhelming fruits in Fruit Battlegrounds, starting with Barrier. Now don't get me wrong, if you're looking for something fun to mess around with in PvP, Barrier can be a bit of a troll pick. It has some decent damage and its cooldowns aren't terrible, but when it comes to boss farming, you might as well be bringing a stick to a gunfight. It just doesn't cut it for that, and honestly, you'll find yourself wishing you picked just about any other fruit. Next up, we've got Chop. Oh boy, Chop is pretty much the definition of a fruit that's in dire need of a buff. The damage is low, and unless you've got the aim of a sniper, landing its main skills feels like a real challenge. You're better off just accepting that you'll miss a lot of your hits. Sure, you get to zoom around in a car, which is fun, but let's be real, that's not enough to save Chop from being one of the worst fruits in the game. To wrap it up, if you're after efficiency and power, you'll want to steer clear of these two. They might bring some laughs and chaos in PvP, but when it comes to serious boss fights or getting the upper hand in battle, you're definitely gonna wish you picked something else. Stick with stronger fruits if you're looking to get the job done, and leave the trolling to Barrier and the joyrides to Chop. The fruits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Ice, Bomb, Sand, and Smoke. Alright, let's dive right into some of the C tier fruits in Fruit Battlegrounds. I know, they may not be the go-to picks for hardcore players, but they've still got some charm and can be pretty fun if you're just looking for a chill time. So, let's talk about Ice, Bomb, Sand, and Smoke fruits, all of which have their moments, but they're not quite as powerful as the higher tier fruits. First up, let's talk about Ice. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Ice can't hit flying enemies, and yes, that's a big downside. But if we ignore that little flaw for a second, Ice actually has a lot going for it. With some solid AoE moves and a freeze effect that lets you combo your enemies, it's pretty satisfying to use. Plus, if you're aiming for Ice v2, this fruit's got your back. So yeah, not perfect, but definitely fun to mess around with if you want to freeze some foes mid-combo. Next, we've got Bomb, which is kind of like the classic beginner's fruit. It's got some really good AoE on its moves, and mobility isn't bad either. The only catch? The windups are pretty long, and experienced players can totally exploit that. But if you're just starting out, you'll appreciate how easy it is to land those big hits, especially in a crowd of enemies. It's simple, it's effective, but don't expect to be pulling off any crazy combos without a bit of practice. Then there's Sand. This one is actually the best of the common fruits, and for good reason. It's got decent damage, solid AoE on its mods, and a wide area stun that can catch players off guard. It's especially useful in early game PvP, where most people aren't great at blocking yet. So, if you're just starting and you want something reliable, Sand's your best bet in the C tier. It's not going to carry you to the top, but it'll hold its own until you can get your hands on something better. Finally, we've got Smoke. Now, Smoke's got decent damage, and most of its moves can go through block, which is a nice little perk. The downside though, no range to speak of, and it's pretty easy for opponents to kite you if you're using it. Still, there's something satisfying about the fact that Smoke can bypass defenses, especially if you're up against players who rely on blocking. It's not the best, but it definitely has a few tricks up its sleeve. So, while none of these fruits are exactly breaking the meta, they all have their unique strengths that make them fun to play. Whether you're freezing your enemies in place with Ice, blowing things up with Bomb, stunning everyone in sight with Sand, or sneaking past blocks with Smoke, there's always room for a little C tier fruit action. The fruits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Flame, Rubber, Magma, Falcon, and Gas. Alright, so let's talk about some of the fruits that are hanging out in that B tier spot in Fruit Battlegrounds. These fruits are solid choices, but they don't quite hit the high marks of the S tier fruits. But hey, they've still got plenty of juice to offer in the right hands. First up, we've got Flame. This fruit might not be the flashiest in the game, but don't let that fool you. It's got great damage, solid range, and an AoE, area of effect, on every attack. Whether you're taking on bosses or duking it out in PvP, Flame holds its own. The only thing you'll have to keep an eye on is flying enemies, as hitting them can be a bit tricky. Still, it's a really reliable fruit for both PvE and PvP. Next, let's talk about Rubber. Now, Rubber is one of those fruits that might not have the highest damage, but it makes up for it in other ways. It's got ridiculously low cooldowns, which means you're constantly spamming moves and keeping up the pressure. The damage isn't insane, but it's more about the consistency. In PvP, it shines because of its fast-paced nature, letting you chain attacks and keep opponents on their toes. Not the hardest hitter, but definitely one of the most annoying to deal with in a fight. Moving on to Magma, this fruit is like a ticking time bomb of damage. Its attacks chain well together, and it can dish out some nice hits. The only downside is that its attacks are on the slow side, meaning you'll want to keep your distance and time things just right. In PvP, it can get outpaced by some of the faster fruits, especially the Epic Plus ones, but in the right hands, Magma still delivers a solid punch. Great for boss fights, but might struggle in fast-paced PvP scenarios. Then there's Falcon, which is all about mobility and damage. It doesn't have the longest range, but who needs range when you've got speed, right? With plenty of ways to close the gap, Falcon can really catch opponents off guard. Plus, the damage is solid enough to make sure they don't get away once you're in close. Most of your moves can even break blocks and set up combos, so it's all about getting in there, staying mobile, and keeping the pressure on your enemies. Next up is Gala, a fruit that's kind of like the silent killer of the B tier. Gas excels in sustained DPS, damage per second, and has a fantastic range on its abilities, making it an absolute beast for boss farming. If you're taking on a big bad, Gas is your go-to fruit for just relentless damage. The catch here is that it has no mobility at all, so if enemies manage to close the gap and get to you, things can go south pretty quickly. In PvP, you're going to need to keep your distance and play smart, because if anyone gets close to you, you're probably toast. So, there you have it. The B tier fruits in Fruit Battlegrounds may not be the absolute best, but they're still full of potential. Whether you're looking for a fruit with solid damage, low cooldowns, or great sustained DPS, there's something here for everyone. Just be sure to play to their strengths, and you might be surprised at how much they can do. The fruits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Phoenix, String, Gravity, Light, Darkness, Pour, and Quake. Alright, let's dive into some of the A tier fruits in Fruit Battlegrounds, the ones that truly pack a punch and make a huge difference in PvP. First up, let's talk about Phoenix. Now, this fruit is an absolute beast when it comes to mobility. Seriously, its transformation is so powerful, you can pull off some amazing close range combos that are nearly impossible to stop. The trick with Phoenix is all about timing your transformation. You need to manage it carefully, especially in PvP. Because while you're in your bird form, you're flying high, but if you misuse it, you could end up grounded and vulnerable. It's high risk, high reward, but if you get it right, the rewards are massive. Then there's String, and let me tell you, this fruit isn't messing around. It has one of the best moves in the game with Fulbright, which actually pulls enemies down from the air, even if they're blocking. It's perfect for dealing with those slippery, high mobility enemies who think they can just fly away. On top of that, String is super mobile and offers solid single target damage, which makes it fantastic for taking out key opponents. If you love being quick on your feet and controlling the flow of battle, String is definitely a top tier pick. Next, we've got Gravity, and if you love raw damage, this fruit is your new best friend. It's kind of a glass cannon though, so don't expect any fancy mobility. Gravity is all about pumping out AoE, area of effect, damage. It might not be as nimble as some of the other fruits, but when it comes to farming or taking on opponents who don't move much, Gravity really shines. It's great for PvP too, especially if you're facing off against fruits that are a little slower on the move. You'll just need to watch out for faster enemies, but if you land your hits, they won't stand a chance. Speaking of speed, Light is another gem you'll want to get your hands on. This fruit is known for its insane mobility, and it has excellent range and damage to boot. The kicker though, is that you need to land light kicks to keep your DPS high. Now this can be a bit tricky when you're up against other high mobility fruits, but if you're fast enough and can time those kicks, you'll be dishing out massive damage. It's one of the best epic fruits in the game, hands down, and when used properly, you can easily outmaneuver just about anyone. Then there's Darkness, which might be easier to obtain compared to some of the other fruits, but don't let that fool you, it's still a powerhouse. It's particularly great for boss farming because of its long-range, high-damage moves. Sure, the Dark End move has a huge startup time, but when you land it, it hits like a truck. Plus, Darkness is solid for PvP, especially when you're looking to control the battlefield, and if you're hunting for Dark X Quake, this fruit has you covered. It's a nice all-rounder that gets the job done without much fuss. Last but definitely not least, Paw. If you're looking for a fruit that excels in PvP, Paw is a top contender. This one has tons of unblockable moves, quick wind-ups, and solid single-target damage. The catch is that you'll need to be pretty accurate with your aim, so if you can't land your shots, you might find yourself struggling. But if you're good at precision, Paw is a force to be reckoned with. Whether you're taking on opponents one by one or just need a quick burst of damage, this fruit delivers in spades. To wrap it all up, Quake is another easy to use fruit that just gets the job done. If you're new to the game or just want something simple, Quake's massive AoE moves will hit just about anything in sight. They're hard to miss and the damage is high enough that you'll feel like a wrecking ball. It's one of the easiest fruits to pick up and start wrecking with, which makes it a great option for both beginners and experienced players alike. So yeah, these A-tier fruits are all solid choices depending on your playstyle, and they're all worth considering when you're gearing up for your next battle in Fruit Battlegrounds. The fruits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Lightning, Venom, Magma V2, Light V2, Flame V2, TS Rubber, Magnet, Ice V2, and Love. Alright, let's dive into some of the best S-tier fruits in Fruit Battlegrounds. First up, we've got Lightning. Now, at first glance, Lightning seems like a solid pick with its area of effect, AoE attacks, and crashing thunder for mobility. But here's the kicker, it's a bit trickier to master than you'd think. Sure, the AoE can be useful, but most of its moves are easily dodged, which means you have to really nail those hits or risk getting punished. It's not the easiest fruit to play, but once you get the hang of it, it can be a real powerhouse. Next, let's talk about Venom. This fruit, it's absolutely killer. I mean, it has stun and guard break on pretty much every single move, which makes it fantastic for locking down your enemies. But the real beauty of Venom lies in its poison effect. It keeps ticking damage, allowing you to dish out some insane sustained DPS. That makes it a top tier pick, especially when you're boss farming. It's one of those fruits that doesn't just hit hard, it keeps hitting even after the fight is over. Now, if you're looking for something with massive AoE and just overall devastation, you've got to check out Magma V2. This is a major upgrade from the original Magma. The AoE is bigger, the damage is higher, and the real star of the show, Crimson Howl. This move lets you air camp, which is like having a free pass to dodge and deal damage in PvP. If you're into dominating the skies and raining down destruction, Magma V2 is the way to go. Then there's Light V2. If you loved Light, you're gonna love Light V2 even more. It's like the perfect fusion of speed and power. Amazing mobility, crazy single target DPS, and it's just an overall beast for both PvP and farming. But there's a catch. Those pesky players who can hit F can really ruin your day. Still, if you can outsmart your opponents, Light V2 can be one of the most satisfying fruits to use. Let's not forget Flame V2. Oh boy, this fruit is a game changer. Flame V2 is all about mobility and AoE. It's perfect for combos, and if you're into PvP, it'll feel like you're an unstoppable force. On top of that, farming bosses is a breeze. Whether you're dealing with crowds of enemies or taking down big bosses, Flame V2 has the versatility to handle it all. You can definitely expect to rack up some wins with this one. Last, but certainly not least, we have TS Rubber. If you're all about dealing some serious DPS, TS Rubber might be your new best friend. It's one of the best fruits when it comes to raw damage, but there's a little trade-off. You've got to land your attacks perfectly because if you miss, you'll be wide open for a counterattack. But if you can nail those combos, TS Rubber is a beast in both PvP and farming, so if you're up for a challenge, this fruit is totally worth mastering. Each of these fruits has its own strengths, and while they're all in the S tier, your choice really depends on your playstyle. Whether you like to control the battlefield, deal high damage, or outmaneuver your opponents, there's something for everyone in Fruit Battlegrounds' S tier lineup. Happy battling! The fruits in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Dark X Quake, Dragon V2, Ope Ope, Soul, Dragon Okuchi, Leopard, Doe, and Nika. Alright, let's dive right into the best of the best in Fruit Battlegrounds, the S+ tier fruits. These are the fruits that everyone wants to get their hands on. They're absolute game changers, packing insane damage, utility, and control in PvP. But hey, they all have their unique quirks and we're about to break them down for you. First up, we've got Dark X Quake. If you're looking for a fruit that just dominates the battlefield, this is it. The AoE damage, insane. The mobility, not too shabby either. Sure, it has a high stamina cost on its moves, which means you can't just spam them endlessly, but that's a small price to pay when you can wipe out multiple enemies at once. If you've got the stamina to back it up, Dark X Quake will make you feel like an unstoppable force. Now, let's talk Dragon V2. This fruit is a beast both in and out of its transformed state. The damage is off the charts and most of its moves stun enemies, making it ridiculously easy to set up combos. It's one of those fruits that just feels right when you're using it. Whether you're in a big brawl or taking on a solo fight, Dragon V2 is always a solid pick. It's a real crowd pleaser in PvP, and it's going to make you feel like a dragon yourself. Moving on to Ope Ope, this one's a bit tricky to master, but once you do, you'll be a menace in PvP. The combo potential here is crazy. The damage is absurd, and if you've got the skill to use it effectively, Ope Ope can clear out entire teams. It might take a little practice to get the hang of it, but the payoff is totally worth it. When you pull off those perfect combos, it feels like nothing else in the game. Then we've got Soul, and while it might have a reputation for lower damage compared to some other mythic fruits, don't let that fool you. Soul is one of the best sky camping fruits, which means it's perfect for those aerial battles where you can just hover and pick off enemies from above. It's easy to use, and once you get the hang of it, you'll realize that its simplicity in PvP is a massive advantage. Plus, it's just fun to fly around and cause chaos. Dragon, the classic, still holds its ground as one of the top tier fruits. It's got all the right tools for PvP, with moves that bypass, block, and stun enemies. You can dish out solid damage even without transforming, which makes it super versatile. Unlike Phoenix, which might leave you feeling a bit vulnerable without its full transformation, Dragon's Beast form is still strong enough to keep you competitive. It's the kind of fruit that works well in a variety of situations. And finally, Okuchi. After getting some much needed buffs, Okuchi has skyrocketed into the S+ tier. The combination of good mobility, solid damage, and the ability to freeze enemies makes it a nightmare in PvP. However, it does have a bit of a drawback in farming, with shorter range moves that make it tougher to grind. But if you're looking for a powerhouse fruit for player versus player action, Okuchi is definitely a top contender, so there you have it. These S+ tier fruits are the real deal in Fruit Battlegrounds. Whether you're into AoE destruction, comboing your way to victory, or flying above the fray, these fruits have something to offer. Make sure to grab one of these bad boys if you want to dominate the arena. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.